thank you very much to the organizers for putting together this wonderful workshop, and thank you for inviting me. I start sharing my screen now, so you should hopefully see it correctly. So my talk will deal with very specific topic, which is the potential infinite divisibility of matter as logical incompossibility. So I will talk about a specific property of matter in the Latin Aristotelian tradition. But before I do that, I start with some preliminaries concerning Aristotle himself. So one of the main points when Aristotle discusses magnitudes and therefore also matter in the physics is his claim that magnitudes, and therefore matter, motion, and also time are continuous. Now, this property of continuity is something that Aristotle defines at different points. And the basic definition is that continuity is the fact that when you have two different physical entities, physical bodies, let's start with this case, and they start to touch, in a sense, when their extremities, their touching and contiguous extremities become one, then those two entities have become one single continuous entity. This notion of continuity entails different other properties in Aristotle. The main one probably is that of potential infinite divisibility. Now, there is still a lot of ongoing debate in current scholarship about the fact that maybe you could also try to, in a sense, define continuity by potential infinite divisibility. But I think that this is kind of a misguided interpretation. Fortunately, there is no time to talk about it now. But let's say, at the very least, when you say that something is continuous, and according to Aristotle, every physical body is continuous, it is potentially infinitely divisible. This, however, is a very peculiar kind of potentiality, because when Aristotle says that a body is potentially infinitely divisible, he also says that this potentiality can never be actualized, as in basically all cases dealing with infinity. You can never posit in Aristotle something like an actual infinity. But so what does it mean that you can divide a body? You can divide it into smaller parts, yet at the end, you can never fully divide it into all of its parts. So I start with the geometrical example. Now, Xi already talked about the relation between natural philosophy and mathematics also in Aristotle. So, but just to make it clear, when we talk about a geometrical example in Aristotle, we're not really talking about something different from bodies, magnitudes, and matter, because mathematical bodies in Aristotle are not really, in this case, geometrical entities, are not really ontologically different from concrete physical bodies. They are simply abstracted from matter and from motion. But in this case, geometrical example provide the best case study to understand how potential infinite divisibility works. So let's start with the easiest kind of example, that is a line segment AB. Now, my drawing abilities are very, very limited, both digitally and analogically. Therefore, I limit myself to, very simple figures. But I hope this would also make the talk more clear. Now, just a basic preliminary. For Aristotle, a line, contrary to modern geometry, is not composed of points. A line segment is composed of smaller and smaller lines. So a point for Aristotle is not an independent ontological entity. You only have points as limits of given lines. In this case, for instance, A and B exist because I am limiting my line to AB, to the portion of extended length comprised between A and B. So in a sense, a point in Aristotle only exists in actuality as the result of a division. So imagine I have divided a longer line into this segment AB. The point A and B come into existence exactly because I divided the longer line at those points. Now, why is it that I cannot divide the line segment AB to infinity? Aristotle, in probably the most extended discussion of the issue, which is contained in De Generazione e Corruzione, book 1, chapter 2, distinguishes between the fact that there is a point anywhere in the line segment AB, still a point in potentiality, not in actuality. And this means that if I take the line segment AB, I can divide it at any point whatsoever. And the fact that there is a point everywhere in it, meaning in this case that I can divide the line segment AB at all of its points together. Now, what does this mean in concrete terms? If you consider the two examples that I put in the slide, where you have 2 points on the line segment AB, points C and D. Now, in case one, I take the line segment AB and I divide it at C and also at D. Now, it does not matter whether the process of division is understood as simultaneous or successive. It's really not the point of the discussion. Imagine that I divide it at both C and D. Well, there's no problem at all, because between C and D, you still have a line. So points C and D exist as the extremities of the lines AC and CD respectively, and CD and DB. But consider now case 2. Here I have the same line segment AB, and take 2 points C and D, which are in a sense immediately next to each other, so that they are really so close that there is no line whatsoever between C and D. Here I graphically try to make it explicit, but just try to make an imaginative effort to really understand it. So there is no line between C and D, and well, in this case, Aristotle says, well, it's not really possible to achieve this kind of division. You either divide the line at C or you divide the line at D, because if you don't have any line whatsoever between C and D, well, they cannot both exist this point. You only have one point, either C or D, but not both of them together. Now, of course, you could, in principle, say I divide at C or I divide at D, but not both of them together. So that's the basic, the gist of the Aristotelian argument. This is a very complex argument, and indeed it always troubled all later commentators. But the medieval Latin interpretations of this argument, very interestingly, in trying to make the Aristotelian argument more explicit, resorted to a very different kind of epistemes, not limiting themselves to the use of geometrical arguments, which still were part of the debate, but also including logic and especially modal logic into the debate. Now, this is very interesting, I think, in relation to the general topic of the workshop, because it shows it is a case study where you see the variety of epistemes applying to understanding a specific issue, which concerns indeed the Aristotelian theory of matter and magnitudes, in this case concerning its potential infinite divisibility. And as far as I have been able to see, this innovation is very specifically a Latin one. I didn't find any evidence of potential infinite divisibility discussed with the tools of modal logic in either any, let's say, late ancient commentator, or in the Arabic tradition, or in the Jewish tradition as well. So the beginning of this kind of new thinking about potential infinite divisibility of matter is already evident in Albert the Great. Now, Albert the Great claims in his sort of paraphrases of De Generatione 1, book 1, chapter 2, that hence many things are possible, which, however, are not compossible, compossibilia. Possible, indeed, is the fact that any of two contrary contingent events can happen, although they cannot exist as true, that is to say, as happening or happen, together. So this is just an intuition. Albert does not develop it further, but what he seems to be saying, if we go back to the two cases of the line, is that, well, dividing the line AB at the points C and D in case 1 merely entails two compossible divisions. So there, not only it is possible to divide line AB at C and also at D, but dividing it at C and D is compossible. Whereas in case 2, it is possible to divide line AB at point C and also at point D, but the two divisions are not compossible. This is the very basic intuition, which is anyway a very interesting one. And what is more, an intuition that gets developed in the further tradition. So if we turn to John Duns Scotus, where here we see that he's really refining the analysis and shifting to the proper logical plane of the discussion, basically consider the whole issue of potential indivisibility of matter as being an issue which can be dealt with in terms of propositional analysis. So Scotus says that if you argue that any singular proposition is true, therefore also the universal proposition, it can be said that the singular propositions are true, not however compossible, compossibiles, and all of them are required for the possibility of the truth of the universal proposition. But then he raises this as an objection to the general discussion. It is true together that a continuum can be divided along A and along B and C and so of any other singular proposition together. And he replies, I say that singular propositions concerning possibility, taken in an absolute way, do not entail formally the universal proposition regarding possibility, but this is a fallacy of the figure of speech from a series of determinate propositions to one determinate proposition. Now, apart from the specific logical fallacy that Scotus is invoking here, the basic scheme that he's presenting is this one. Well, you can take the proposition, the line AB can be divided at the point C, and this is certainly true. You can take the proposition, the line AB can be divided at the point D, this is certainly true. The line AB can be divided at the point E, this again is certainly true, and so on ad infinitum, considering the propositions regarding any point whatsoever on the line AB. But now, from this, you cannot infer that the proposition, the line AB can be divided at a point C and at a point D and at a point E, and in all of its points is true. This is a fallacy. So you see how refined the kind of logical analysis becomes in this context, but we're still discussing a specific problem concerning matter and magnitude here. Now, if we turn to another commentator, this is my last example, John Buridan in the 14th century. Here you see that, again, the same discussion goes on when Buridan in his Questiones super degenerazione, so again discussing the same Aristotelian passage I mentioned above, has to discuss the issue of potential infinite divisibility. He again resorts to modal logic, but he does it in an innovative way. So even compared to Scotus. So he says, it is doubted, moreover, what we should say concerning the principle. Once a possible proposition has been posited in existence, nothing impossible follows. Democritus' intention was that the meaning of that principle is that if a proposition concerning possibility, a propositio de possibili, is true, and it is converting an assertorial one, in unum de inesse, nothing impossible follows from the assertorial one. Therefore, he, in this case Democritus, which is Aristotle's interlocutor in the passage mentioned, said that if a body can be divided in all of its parts, then nothing impossible follows from this proposition. A body has been divided in all of its parts. But the set gloss of this principle is false. So the scheme Buridan is advocating is basically this one. You take the proposition, the line AB can be divided at all of its points, and this is true, but you cannot infer from this one, the line AB has been divided at all of its points. You cannot bring it into actuality, in a sense, moving from the modal proposition about possibility to the assertorial proposition about, in this case, reality. So you see, a lot of schemes actually are going on, but you also see that there is a basic general overall intuition that runs through all these commentators. So with these very brief examples, and I just try to sketch the surface of the debate, sorry if I have to resort to some technicalities, but I hope the general aim of my talk is clear. Well, I have tried to show you that there are a lot of different epistemes from geometry, but also modal logic going on in trying to understanding potential infinite divisibility of matter in the late Aristotelian tradition. What is more, the case of matter and one of its properties acts as a stimulus to develop tools of modal logic in the medieval Aristotelian tradition. And what is interesting is that the medieval Aristotelian commentators really show some creativity in their exegesis of Aristotle here, as in many other places. And they also seem to share a basic unity in understanding, although, of course, they try to frame the issue in very different ways. So all these are, I think, some sort of pointers to further discussions that I just wanted to raise as sort of very preliminary sketch also in my case. And I would be very, very interested in seeing any possibility of comparisons here with the Confucian tradition and pre-modern Chinese philosophy more generally. So thank you very much for listening to me.